Alrighty, welcome to AP Art History Review. So today we're talking about the subject of the vernacular. So it covers all artworks that we've studied in AP Art History thus far. It's just reviewing for our AP exam for God knows when it'll actually happen. So vernacular, as defined in the dictionary, typically relates to language spoken by regular people, so not lofty, not academic, just a dialect of the regular person. But artists also use the vernacular to relate to the common public, like Vermeer in his genre scenes of the Dutch Baroque period. Do you see my pearl earring? I even whited out my eyebrows. So today we'll be talking about how artists use the vernacular to relate to the public. So we first saw this idea introduced during the Renaissance period or even late medieval with the concept of empirical science. So empirical science was using observations of the natural world to draw references in artwork. So if we look at Madonna and Child by Fra Filippo Lippi, we can see obvious references to the Arno Valley, and that would have been readily apparent to the viewer. Over here, we see a change in how Mary is shown to the public. We see her in a modern Renaissance home contemporary for the time that was created in the 1400s by the workshop of Robert Campin. We see Mary in contemporary Renaissance dress, and both of these things would have been very relatable to the audience. Now in this instance, the audience is not the commoner. Both of these artworks are very high-end commission paintings, so the viewer was a high-end member of society. So while these are relatable with images of the vernacular, the goal was to be relatable to the high-end audience and not the entire public. We see that change when we go to the Italian Baroque period. So this is meant to relate to the commoner, to relate to the average sinner. So we see Jesus, hey, that's regular, but now he's in a bar amongst tax collectors, and they're wearing regular tax collector clothing, doing seedy tax collector things. And this was meant to relate to the commoner, to relate to everyone. And the conversation about that is everyone can be redeemed. Everyone can be a part of this conversation, not just high-end society. And the reason why Caravaggio needs to do this during the Italian Baroque period is because the Catholic Church had lost many of its followers due to the Protestant Reformation. So we're trying to draw people back in by making the artwork relevant to the common viewer. If we look back to the Renaissance, this was not relevant to the common viewer. Not everybody had a house like this. Not everybody can relate to the Arno Valley. Only the viewer would. And the viewer was a very specific, high-level society person. With the Italian Baroque, we sort of bring that down a bit, where instead of relating to just the one viewer, the patron or the commissioner, now we're relating to the commoner. And we see that developed even more during the Romantic period. Now, Delacroix has some images or some concepts of the vernacular and liberty leading the people. First of all, this was a current event for the time. It wasn't distant history, it wasn't an imagined location, and this was sort of his impression of it, his emotion. This was seen from his window, it was from the streets of Paris, and we see the vernacular used to communicate a sense of raw emotionality. The idea of here is our revolutionary leader with our piles of contemporary furniture leading this attack against the monarchy, Charles X. So using the vernacular to inspire the masses to join in on the French Revolution. We needed them to join in. We needed them to relate to the topic. We needed them to see themselves here, to see this from the window, to relate it to the here and now. So Delacroix and Romantic artists would use the vernacular to sort of comment on what's currently happening in society, as opposed to just what happened in the distant past. The realism, sorry, my husband is drilling things in the backyard. Kick his ass wearing my cool girl with a pearl earring getup. Alright, so we also saw the vernacular on display with realism. With artists like Courbet, he wanted to paint things that were currently happening in front of him, and that would have related to everybody. What we see in Burial at Ornans was a funeral that everyone could relate to, and that was his goal, to relate to everybody. He wanted to make these massive paintings that related to everybody, so that when you walked in the museum, you would say like, oh, I've experienced that too. It's not something that's new and different, and it's not something from the distant, faraway past. Using the vernacular to document today, regular, ordinary people, the imbalance of the composition, because this is what it would have actually looked like. And then the vernacular here with the clothing of the individuals. Again, the clothing would have shown the cycle of poverty, but also identified them as being in poverty. With realism, we're really concerned with the plight of the working class, the plight of people in poverty, thanks to the writings of Karl Marx and communism. And using the vernacular really relates this scene to something that we would all experience when you're walking down the side of the road and you see, you know, the local prisoners picking up trash for like 50 cents an hour, which is another form of slave labor if you think about it. Anyway, so using the vernacular to connect to the common person was sort of new and unheard of for Courbet's time. They really wanted him to paint things that were dramatic and important. And he said, no, we should paint things that the commoner would recognize. Now, another form of vernacular is the use of genre scenes. Genre scenes we started to see develop during the Dutch Baroque time period. So focusing on everyday life, domestic interiors. We have people in the portraits, but they're not specific people. They're not famous people. They're not monarchs. It's not Jesus. They're meant to sort of be all of us at the same time. When we see this woman holding a balance, there's no indication of who she is, of what family she comes from, because she could be any of us struggling with, do I work enough to feed my family, or am I being too greedy having all of this jewelry? Am I supporting the local jeweler, or am I being vain? So genre scenes would connect to the average person. And Vermeer does that during the Dutch Baroque time period. One of the reasons that that's sort of a thing is the Calvinist doctrine outlawed scenes of religious iconography. They were very Protestant. It was close to Germany, close to Martin Luther and all his teachings and the Protestants. So while we do see Jesus in the back, it's a painting version and it's a symbol of Christianity and of religion, but it's not meant, we're not meant to worship this painting. This doesn't connect us to Jesus in any way. With this painting, Vermeer is sort of inviting the conversation to look within ourselves and see if we can identify with that struggle of balancing piety, so being religious, or greed, like working enough, working too much, when is enough enough, when is too much jewelry, too much, and that sort of conversation. As we move forward in art history, we see the vernacular present in Mary Cassatt's Impressionist paintings. So her subject matter was the vernacular. It was the everyday mother and daughter. We're out on the riverboat tour. We're inside getting dressed. We're fixing our hair. So that's very common things. And if you notice, all these individuals sort of lack identity. It's all of us, it's all of our families. We see these things every day. But what she does to sort of really increase her vernacular is her choice of medium. She uses printmaking. Printmaking brought the cost of her artwork down and made it very accessible to everybody. So while a painting would be very expensive because a lot of time goes into it, there's only one, and as you know from supply and demand, what happens if you have only one? What happens to price? Yash buddy, this is for you, economics! It gets more expensive. So with printmaking, because it is mass produced, it becomes a lot cheaper. So our artwork becomes accessible to the ordinary person. It becomes part of the vernacular. It becomes part of the ordinary person's artwork collection. So both her subject matter, these vernacular images, moms, babies, leisure time, getting ready, that would be relating to the common people. Her choice of material, her printmaking medium, makes it further accessible to the ordinary person. Now, we've talked about printmaking before with Chairman Mao and Route to Anyuan. So while this is mass-produced, we do want to put it in front of everyone, the ordinary person. but particularly the working class. Chairman Mao is really trying to market himself as a member of the working class, a pioneer looking to help the working class. So this particular location, Anyuan, was the site of a coal mining strike, and here he is marching forth in his nondescript clothing, vernacular, generic clothing, the ordinary man coming to fight for the ordinary man. He's gonna fight for the coal miners on strike to get them better wages. And this gives him political fortune. It gives him favor with this community to sort of vote in favor of him and of communism. Look at me working for the working class. I'm one of you. So Chairman Mao wants to use the vernacular in this lithograph and then distribute it to all the ordinary people who are going to be voting him into his dictatorship in just a few short years. So in this instance, we're using the vernacular in both the location, Anyuan, in his clothing, this regular nondescript clothing, and the choice of print to distribute it to the ordinary people whom he wants to vote for him. So that's the end of the vernacular. Tune in soon for other artworks we'll be talking about and other fantastic costumes I'm gonna come up with for you. Bye y'all, love you, miss you.